on the one side, Washington has agreed to add 30,000 more troops to the ranks in Afghanistan, and on the other side, saying that they want to talk to the good Taliban.
Well, I think it's the situation that is typical of any conflict, long-term conflict. On one hand, you have to address your operational needs, and on the other hand, naturally, you cannot take the subject of negotiations and talks from the table. But having said that, I need to emphasize the fact that when you talk to the Taliban or to anybody, you need to talk, even when you share power with someone, you have to have the power to share it with someone. This government has to build the confidence and the credibility that it requires, it needs from the people of Afghanistan. It has to galvanize the people around it so it can talk to the Taliban, or at least be on the same playing field with the Taliban to be able to exude some confidence. Otherwise, if we don't have a government that has at least the psychological credibility that the people always lend to a government, then it will be very difficult to talk from a position of strength and then produce something tangible. And also, before those things can happen, I agree with your other guest that negotiations and talks should not be removed from the table, but at least we should go through a confidence building period. Confidence building measures should be tangible measures that both sides can build trust around it, and then negotiations can begin. Without confidence building, I don't think any side can produce anything.
Now, Mr. Sultanzoy, you talked about confidence building with the Afghan government itself. Do you see that happening in the near future, that the Afghan government will work on itself as far as strengthening itself and will provide an environment or atmosphere of confidence building?
In the near future, I see that as a very difficult task for the Afghan government, because as we speak, we don't even have a cabinet that is confirmed by the parliament yet. And soon after that, we will be getting busy with the next parliamentary election, and I don't know what kind of election will be produced unless we change the conditions that produced the previous election. So we as a government have a huge task in front of us, not only to fix our problems, but also pay attention to the reconstruction, pay attention to creating some credibility with our allies and their constituencies, not just their governments, but in the public in the United States and Europe and our neighborhood also. So it's a very, very huge and monumental task in front of the Afghan government and in front of the Afghan nation. And also, having said that, I think that our regional countries, especially Iran and Pakistan, can contribute towards giving Afghanistan a hand that will be helpful towards bringing stability.
Okay, now turning back to the U.S., Mr. Martin, over 300 American troops have been killed in Afghanistan so far this year. Do you think that the average American will support this war more for the long term if the number of soldiers killed continue to rise?
The answer is no, and that's been clear from the polls. From the beginning of this year, we had 50 to 60% of Americans saying that they were supporting what's going on in Afghanistan, and most recently now it's the opposite, 55 to 60% who don't support. There was polls that said only maybe 35% of Americans supported what Obama said in his speech. So clearly the American public is turning against this war. So I was surprised that we were going to spend 30,000 of our precious treasure in troops over in Afghanistan when that money can be more wisely spent on what my colleague said from Afghanistan, and that is on issues of reconstruction, aid, and development.
Okay, Mr. Martin, I am so sorry, but we are out of time for this segment of the program. I thank you, and I thank Mr. Sultanzoy for being with us. Now turning to our next subject. Now just weeks after announcing he would freeze the settlements for 10 months, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will resume the settlement building in the West Bank right after the 10-month period expires. However, even during the so-called period of settlement freeze, there's still expansion taking place, including the building of public Israeli offices. Now, so why say one thing and do another, and exactly what's going on in this situation? I'm going to turn first to Beirut, where I'd like to welcome our guest, Professor of Political Science at American University, Dr. Ahmed Musali. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
Now, Doctor, what's your perspective on this? Why is Israel, first of all, announcing Netanyahu just a few weeks ago said that he would freeze the settlement buildings on the West Bank for 10 months, and now today he said that right after the 10 months are over, after the moratorium is over, that he will continue to expand. First of all, why did they announce it? And second of all, why the differences? One day they are going to expand, and the next day they say that they're going to put a moratorium on it. How do you see this?
Well, first of all, this is not unusual with the Israelis. They always have double talk. And in fact, what Prime Minister Netanyahu has announced is a linguistically politically designed device in order to satisfy U.S. President Obama by saying that he's going to freeze the settlement for 10 months. At the same time, he is ingratiating himself to the radical right-wing groups with him, and by saying about the exceptions will include certain areas, building 29 official building. We don't consider there are settlements in Jerusalem. And as you see it on TV every day, if Palestinians kicked out of their houses. And in fact, if you want to come to the end of it, there is no freeze on settlement. This is just to give probably President Abbas a boost that will allow him to at least say to his people there is some kind of a freeze. We can maybe start negotiation or the beginning of a new negotiation process that will lead, as you know, to nowhere except more increasement in settlement, taking more Palestinian land and so forth. The atmosphere, the political atmosphere in Palestine is bleak, and what Netanyahu is saying and doing is so obvious that is contradictory in itself, and consequently this is designed to please the international community and the radical Israeli population.
Okay, let me turn to London. Welcome the guest, founder of Palestine Telegraph, and journalist, Sameh-Habeeb. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, how do you see it? Do you think that this basically is something trying to get the international community to support it? What do you think the main goal of Tel Aviv is by announcing these actions regarding the settlements?
Well, as your guest just said, it's part of the Israeli maneuvering policy over the peace process and the settlement issue. Israelis have said many times they're going to continue with the peace process, but all the time they've been creating facts on the grounds, the facts on the grounds of the settlements all over the West Bank. And Netanyahu, in the meantime, cannot face three main parts, cannot face his Likud party. He is having a very strong opposition within his own party. He's facing opposition from the radicals in the other parties who are part of his coalition, and he's facing more opposition from the councils of the settlements overall the West Banks. So he's trying to maneuver by announcing this decision, but on the ground he will continue, as you've said, by building the public service